Buddy, the horror story.
I still can't explain what happened to me and my four-legged best friend just a few days ago. I'm 45 years old, and I've never seen anything like it in my life, truly. I live far from the city in a small rural town, and honestly, I don't even have anyone to share this madness with. Even now, I feel scared to go to bed, and that's with a double-barrel shotgun under my bed for protection. My home sits on the very edge of this dying town, where I've lived for about 10 years. I moved here as a young man, seeking peace and quiet away from the hustle of city life, back when this town was still somewhat alive. But time passed, and everything changed. The elderly passed away, and young people left the first chance they got, fleeing to better opportunities. Those with nowhere else to go stayed behind. Now only a handful of homes remain, and even those are barely holding up. To be honest, I never needed much social interaction. I hardly talked to anyone except the cashier at the local store, and that was only when I went for supplies. But even that stopped when our only store shut down about 3 years ago. They said it wasn't profitable to keep it open for just a few dozen people, especially when most of us didn't have much money to spend anyway. And with the roads crumbling, getting supplies in was both expensive and inconvenient. So, it was just me and Mother Nature, alone together. That's when I got a dog. He became the closest companion I'd ever had. I named him Buddy. Not the most creative name, I admit, but it fit. He came to our town out of nowhere, like a bolt from the blue. Remember, I was out working in the yard when I heard barking beyond the fence. I went inside, grabbed some bread and a little bit of meat and brought it out to him for a snack. That was the start of our friendship. From that day on, he never left my side. I even made him a collar, just to make sure he wouldn't wander off and get lost. Over time, I started teaching Buddy to hunt. Hunting had long been a way of life here, keeping the town fed. Between the woods, the garden, and occasional visits from family members of the remaining residents, we managed to get by. That's how life went. We hunted, fished, grew tobacco and vegetables in the garden, and always had enough to eat. Life moved along at its own slow pace. The days turned into months and years. Buddy grew older, smarter, and more obedient. He understood basic commands, and sometimes I felt like he could understand me better than most people when I talked to him. He always listened intently. A few times a week, my friend and I would go into the woods together. I'd usually hunt, but I didn't mind fishing, and I always made room in my basket for some mushrooms and berries. About 2 weeks ago, disaster struck. As usual, we went for a walk through the nearby woods. It was late in the day with the sun beginning to set. The horizon was glowing with the last rays of light, and it was about time to head back home when Buddy suddenly bolted into the forest like he was scared out of his mind. He tore through the trees and bushes so quickly that I could barely keep up. Of course, I tried to chase him. I called out his name, shouting as loud as I could, but it was like he couldn't hear me. Occasionally, I'd hear him whining like a frightened pup. I followed him as best I could until I tripped over a root and lost sight of him. I've always believed that animals can sense things humans can't. They notice danger before it even gets close and warn us to stay alert. But not this time. At least, that's what I thought as I wandered through the forest, hoping to find my furry friend. Evening was settling in, draping the treetops in darkness. There was no sign of Buddy. Finally, when the forest was completely engulfed in shadows, I realized my search was futile. I called his name a few more times, but he didn't answer. Heart heavy, I headed back home. I told myself he'd find his way back. After all, those trails were ours. We'd walked them together countless times. He was smart. He'd make it home. By morning, he still hadn't returned. I jumped out of bed at 6, immediately checking every corner of the house, hoping to find him lying on his bed in the hallway, chewing on the bone I'd given him the night before. But no, the bone was untouched. Sadness washed over me. I felt more alone than ever, and dark thoughts began creeping in. What if something happened to him in the woods? What if a wild animal attacked him? Or worse? These thoughts pushed me to get dressed, grab some food, and head out to search for him again. I spent half the day scouring the forest, going over every path, bush, and tree. Fortunately, the snow had only recently melted, making it easier to search. I called out, checked under every shrub, and even wiped away a tear or two when I thought about losing him for good. And then, I returned home feeling crushed and defeated. I even went around to ask the remaining neighbors in our little village. No one had seen or heard anything, and their responses only deepened my despair. I had no appetite for anything, so I brewed some herbal tea, drank it, and lay down to sleep. Still, I held on to a faint hope that Buster might scratch at the door during the night. But it didn't happen. Not that night, nor the next, not even after a week had passed. I tried to adjust to life without him, though the loneliness pressed down on me harder than ever. There were moments when I even thought about chatting with the neighbors, just for some company. But what could I say to the elderly folks in our village, many of whom were slowly losing touch with reality? Then, one evening, just as I was about to turn in, I heard a noise outside my window. The windows in my old house are thin, and even the smallest sound carries through. I heard something scratching at the back door. My heart leapt. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window. There, next to the door, was my dog, my Buster. I recognized him instantly by his fur. Excited, I rushed to the door and flung it open. There he was, filthy beyond belief. Mud covered him from head to toe, tangled with bits of weeds and what looked like algae. "Where have you been, buddy?" I cried out in relief. "How did you manage to get this dirty? Come on, come inside." But Buster didn't move. He sat on the porch, tongue hanging out, panting heavily. I had to pick him up and carry him inside. Straight to the bathroom he went. With no running water, I set a bucket on the stove to heat while I started pulling the clumps of dirt and vegetation from his fur. "Good Lord, where have you been, boy? You've lost so much weight. Don't worry, there's still a bone waiting for you." I couldn't stop smiling. "I'm just so glad you're back." But as I washed him in the warm water, I noticed something strange. Buster wasn't himself. He was terribly thin, barely able to stand on his legs as I scrubbed him with a sponge. Then I noticed a dark spot on his neck, near his back. It wouldn't wash off. At first I thought it was just a stubborn stain, but soon I realized it wasn't dirt at all. The mark looked odd. Whenever I tried to touch it, Buddy would growl and bare his teeth at me. That was unlike him. Never in all the years we'd been together had he behaved like this. "What's wrong, Buddy? Why are you growling at me?" I said, trying to calm him. All right, I won't touch it. Just relax." I cleaned him up as best I could, removing the swamp-like grime from his fur. From the smell and the debris, it seemed like he had fallen into a bog or something similar. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that he had come back. That night, I settled him into his bed, feeling happier than I had in weeks. Exhausted but relieved, I climbed into bed and quickly fell asleep. A few times during the night, I thought I heard Buddy whimpering, but my tired body refused to let me get up to check on him. In the days that followed, I began to notice that Buddy wasn't the same playful, energetic dog I had known. Something terrible must have happened to him in the woods. He grew weaker and more lethargic. He stopped going outside and barely touched his food. The bone I'd saved for him sat untouched. I tried everything, petting him, scratching his favorite spots, but all I got in return were growls and bared teeth. It was as if he didn't recognize me anymore, as if the bond we had shared for years had vanished. Then came the night when I realized the awful truth. It wasn't Buddy. Whatever had returned to me wasn't my dog. I was jolted awake by the sound of whining, louder and closer than before. Opening my eyes, I saw him sitting right beside my bed, staring at me. His eyes reflected a strange, glowing light, like tiny flashlights. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but then I remembered there was no light. The windows were covered, and the night outside was pitch black. Buddy, or whatever he had become, began to growl, his body tense and rigid. Then, out of nowhere, he started barking, a deep, guttural sound that echoed through the house as if he were facing a mortal enemy. When I got out of bed to calm him, he lunged at me, sinking his teeth into my leg. The pain was sharp and immediate. Blood poured from the wound as I struggled to shake him off. Finally managing to kick him away, he retreated to the corner of the room, baring his teeth and growling, his eyes still glowing in the darkness. I didn't know what to do. Could I throw him out into the cold? He was my dog, or at least he used to be. Taking him to a vet wasn't an option, not with no transportation and no money, so I sat there, staring at him, while he stared back at me, and I made a decision I never thought I'd have to make. Through tears, I leashed him up. Whatever this creature was, it wasn't my buddy anymore. Maybe he'd picked up some disease in the woods, or maybe it was something far worse. Either way, I couldn't keep him in the house. I grabbed my coat and headed out with him into the night. He licked the dark spot on his neck as we walked. Curious, I bent down for a closer look. Maybe it was healing, I thought. After all, some time had passed. I put on gloves and gently touched the area. At first, Buddy seemed calm, but when my hand got too close, he snapped at me again, snarling with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. It was as if something unearthly had taken hold of him, and in that moment, I realized. I bent down to inspect the mark. I should have never looked. Underneath the fur was a bloody, pus-filled mess. I could even see a hint of bone. Oh God, what happened to you? My mind raced with thoughts. Maybe he had fought another animal and the wound got infected. That would explain why he wouldn't let me near it. It seemed like a logical answer. But it didn't change my decision. Keeping him at home and watching him suffer, or worse, die, was something I couldn't bear. My heart ached as I led him toward the woods. I knew I'd be coming back alone. The night air was thick, and the sleepiness that had clung to me earlier was long gone. We walked the familiar path. I didn't even look at him, struggling to face what I was about to do. Then, at the same spot as before, the leash snapped, and he bolted into the trees. Without thinking, I ran after him. Even now, I don't know why I did it. I turned on my flashlight, pushing through branches and jumping over fallen logs. Suddenly, I felt water soaking into my shoes. Shining the light ahead, I froze. A small swamp lay before me with a fallen tree to the side. Underneath the tree was the body of my dog. Yes, it was him, my dog, but he was nothing more than decayed remains. The skull and bones were draped in scraps of skin and fur. I staggered back, horrified. If this is him, I whispered, then who did I let into my home? My stomach churned as the implications hit me. The body had been there for a long time, unmistakably decomposed. Then, a rustling sound to my right jolted me. I spun around, aiming my flashlight in that direction. I swear to God, I saw him. My dog's silhouette disappeared behind a tree. It wasn't my imagination. I know what I saw. I pointed the light back at the body. It hadn't moved. The bones were still there. "What the hell is going on?" I muttered, my chest tight with dread. I glanced around and realized I didn't know where I was. Bare trees surrounded me, and my feet sank into the mud with each step. I needed to get out of there. Nothing good was going to come from staying. I started stepping backward, unable to look away from the decayed remains. Then I heard splashing in the swamp. I focused my light on the water. Something was moving, emerging from the murky depths. At first I saw horns, maybe from a deer or an elk, but then a human-like head began to rise. My legs gave out, and I fell onto the damp ground. I couldn't stop staring as it clawed its way out of the swamp, limbs thrashing and pulling itself onto the shore. In my panic, I dropped the flashlight. I didn't get a clear view, but I didn't need one. It was enough to know that this thing, this creature, had crawled out of a remote, desolate swamp in the middle of the forest. I scrambled backward, too scared to stand, while the monstrous figure, draped in swamp weeds and slime, kept rising. Then I heard barking. I looked up to see my dog bounding toward it, tail wagging. He looked happy, despite the fact that he was half decayed, his body eaten away by worms and dirt. The horned figure crouched down awkwardly, barely able to balance on its legs, and started petting him. That was the last straw. I pulled myself up using a tree for support and ran as fast as I could in the opposite direction, weaving through the trees, too terrified to look back. The two figures stood by the swamp, watching me as I fled. When I couldn't run anymore, I collapsed on the ground, gasping for air. Thankfully, I had run in the right direction. By some miracle, I ended up near the edge of the forest, close to the village. By the time I got home, the sun was beginning to rise. Sleep was impossible, of course, but the strangeness wasn't over yet. Later that day, I went to the well to fetch water. I heard someone call. It was the old lady from the next house over, sitting on her porch with an ancient radio. She was fiddling with the dial, trying to catch a station. "Could you help me?" she asked. "This darn thing won't pick up a signal." I set my buckets down and went over to her. Taking the radio in my hands, I adjusted the antenna and tried to tune it. As I worked, I noticed her eyes fixed on my leg. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "Have you looked at your leg, son?" the old lady replied. I glanced down. I had gone out in sandals, so my legs were bare. There, on my calf, was a dark mark. It was in the exact same spot where the dog had bitten me. I hesitated, still staring at the mark on my leg. "Did you see him come back?" I asked. "I saw everything, son," the old woman replied, her smile unsettling. "I spend most of my time watching people through my window." She leaned forward. "But let me tell you this. When you thought you let your beloved pet back into your home, you didn't. You let something evil inside." "I figured that out, miss," I muttered, uneasily shifting my weight. She continued, "I've been through something similar, but it wasn't with a dog. It was a cat, about 10 years ago." Her expression grew darker. "It ran off into the woods and we couldn't find it. I searched for weeks. Even my kids came to help. But whatever's out there, in that forest, it's not normal. My grandmother used to tell me about a swamp deep in those woods. She said animals are drawn to it, like it's calling them. They go there and disappear, but then they come back." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Only, when they return, they're not the same. People from our town have vanished there too. That swamp doesn't give anything back the way it took it." My stomach turned as she continued. When my cat came back, it acted like itself, mostly. But at night, I'd see things. Someone or something prowling around the yard, looking for something. Maybe it was looking for its new pet, or maybe its owner. The memory made her shiver. It lures people into the woods, to that swamp. I'm sure of it. Her words brought back the image of that horned creature petting my dog by the swamp with its gnarled skeletal hands. "Thank God my kids came to get me," she said. I begged them to take me with them. When I came back home later, the cat was gone. All that was left were strands of swamp weeds and algae. Her gaze dropped to my leg. "That mark on you? It's a bad sign. A very bad sign." "What should I do?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Go to church," she said firmly. "Light a candle and pray. The sooner the better. Someone there will know what to do." She added, "My son's coming in a couple of days. If you need a ride to town, he can take you." "Yes, of course. Thank you," I stammered, my gratitude mixed with unease. She crossed herself as I handed back her now-tuned radio. I nodded and headed back to the well. 2 days later, I rode to town with her son. I visited the church, lit a candle, and prayed. Over the next few weeks, the dark mark on my leg gradually faded. Life slowly returned to normal. The only reminder of Buddy was a photo of us together, perched on my refrigerator. As for that dreadful night, I did my best to bury the memory. Whenever I walked in the woods, I avoided the swamp altogether, steering clear of it like my life depended on it. Maybe it did. Smash that like button if you got scared, and leave a comment telling us which moment gave you chills. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not afraid. Choose one of the 2 videos on the screen to test your nerves. Boo!